Now on to a very powerful, no pun intended, topic. Tonight's class is on astrological delineation with astrodynes, and you know, it would no doubt surprise you if I started class without a quote, so.
We don't like surprises.
Yeah, this one is. An individual is not born until the inner plane weather, as mapped by astrological positions, is closely similar to the organization of the thought cells within his unconscious mind. Thus, his birth chart is a very accurate map of his character at the time of his birth. That comes from the Astrodyne manual, and the author is Albert Benjamin. Okay, what are astrodynes? Astro means star, dyna means power. And astrodynes are a means of measuring the relative amount of power, harmony, and discord in any chart. Now, astrodynes actually came about as the result of independent research that was going on around the world, but by members of the Church of Light Astrological Research Department. This took place primarily during the 1930s and 1940s. The results of which were sent back to Los Angeles, and Albert Benjamin, aka C.C. Zane, author of the Brotherhood of Light Lessons, and W.M.A. Drake basically compiled them in 1946 into the system we know today. Astrodynes have been alternately called stellar dynamics and cosmodynes by Doris J. Stone. She penned that term in the 1970s. Here's the real fun. I never thought I'd be talking about the good old days. But when you've been around long enough, you used to do this stuff by hand. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And didn't think twice about it.
Oh, I did.
Well.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to know.
Be easier. So, yes, if you wanted this information, which is really valuable, you would have to spend, 8 to 12 hours doing accumulative math. In addition to having spent 2 hours in just setting up a chart, having calculated the house best, the planetary positions, and the aspects, then you'd add on to that, giving a certain quantity of power to each and every aspect of the chart, and then adding all of that up. So, aren't you glad you don't have to do that anymore?
Yes, very happy about this.
So, in 1971, Horace A. Howe of Astronumeric Service developed the first computer program to calculate astrodynes, thus making them more accessible to astrologers. Who could get paid to calculate astrodynes for someone? Only those who have the wealthiest of clients. And the thing is, when you're working with clients, the person on that end of the counseling doesn't really know what you're doing, or how much time it takes, or necessarily the jargon you're using. They only want the story that relates to them. So it's hard to get paid for doing things like astrodynes and or progressions by hand. Now, since 1997, the Church of Light has offered the horoscope program, which was developed by our president, Paul Brewer. In addition to astrodynes, this program calculates Hermetic system of progressions, now, when we're looking at astrodynes, what they do is they calculate power, harmony, and discord. And they calculate them for the 4 factors in the chart. And this is what we've been learning about over the last 4 weeks. Planets, signs, houses, and aspects can all be measured. In an Astrodyne report, they are ordered from the most powerful down to the weakest.
Is that Obama's?
No, this is again Gandhi's chart. This
that's
is from
Gandhi's. So he has
last
a,
week.
because Obama has a weak sun,
Sun
too.
and a dominant moon.
And a dominant
Yeah.
moon, yeah.
Interesting parallel, though. Although he got the Nobel Peace Prize,
Who did?
Obama. You know, some of us wonder how that happened.
Well, it's no different than the last one. Got it. No.
That's right, we're not supposed to talk politics in this room. So, okay,
Whoa.
Who's that?
That's Doris.
that is Doris Chase Down
Really?
in around 1945.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. That's
You
the
know?
first time I've seen a picture.
If I remind myself every time I pass a mirror, I was once young and beautiful too. Thank God for cameras.
A member
you know?
of the Church of Light from way back when.
Yeah, she started working at the Church of Light around 1942. So, now, here's a quote from Doris. Testing this technique on charts of natives with whom you are well acquainted, I should do it in a Massachusetts accent, if I can.
Yeah, really.
Will reveal how Cosmodynes helps the astrologer to delve into the causes and inner motives of events. Further than that, inquiries into the apparent mysteries of actions and state of mind become more unbiased, more individualized and objective. So this is from her book, How to Read Cosmodynes. So, what are we talking about? Well, we talk about astrodyne. We talk about the volume of energy that is being expressed by any planet, sign, house, or aspect. The greater the volume means the greater expression that particular area has in a chart. The order of the planets by power can reveal our personal hierarchy of needs. This is important because when we're analyzing a chart, we're truly trying to understand the character of an individual. And the best way to understand that character is by being able to really see what the motivations are. And those motivations are broken down by the 12 urges in the chart, plus the ascendant and midheaven have an influence here as well. So to know whether somebody is motivated by individuality or by utopian thinking or by safety thoughts or aggressive thoughts is a very important thing. Plus, one of the things you will have in charts is where sometimes, though this is pretty obvious, the difference here, but sometimes you'll have planets which are ranked within a fairly close equivalency to one another. And these will show individuals or personalities that are basically dominated by more than one trend of thinking.
So, like in the case of Gandhi, his dominant needs are expression of his domestic urges,
Right.
followed by his aggressive urges, or his,
Mm-hmm.
and then his religious urges. Is that,
Right, and that would greatly describe him. The only thing is, he's somebody whose aggressive urges were transformed. He fought, but he fought non-violently, and he fought for peace.
Well, it's like the Moon and the Mars they antidote one another too, don't they?
They do. because we know that it's far too easy for the moon to do what when it's dominant?
To be docile.
Yeah,
you
be
know,
submissive, to be
retiring.
docile. I'll just sit here and accept my fate because I'm a good little boy. But Mars is action, and it's deciding that one will actually get up and do something about their conditions. And so on that level, we can truly see that in the life of Gandhi because he lived his life as an activist. He never stopped. Except for, the few moments he had for meditation or being imprisoned. But even in those environments, he was actively moving towards the goals that he had. Okay, I think I've got another quote. Back from the Astrodyne manual. And here we go. The relative power of a planet indicates the relative power of the thought cells of that planetary type in the unconscious mind, and thus the relative power of the natural aptitudes characteristic of the planet. The more powerful the natural aptitudes, the easier it is to develop them into ability of their particular planetary type. But in addition to influencing the thoughts and behaviors, the thought cells possess psychokinetic power by which they bring into the life conditions and events of the kind they desire. Therefore, the more powerful a planet is in the birth chart, the more powerful the thought cells it maps to have to bring into the life conditions and events of its type.
Holy cow.
I know. Was there a period in there anywhere? Yes, there was.
One.
There's actually two.
Oh,
There were two sentences.
And my mom read something and says, "My God, I got 9 lines down." I actually counted them. I says there was no period.
Yep.
Yeah.
He had a mind that just went away with him.
Yeah.
It's a sad thing.
It's, you know.
Why punctuate? I'm not done thinking yet.
That's excellent.
Wow, that is a quote.
Yes.
But I think we all got it. Basically,
Yeah.
the more powerful that particular planet is in your chart, the more likely you are to have events and experiences that are of that marked nature, of that signature in your life. So, in case you didn't get it, here's how it works.
Uh-oh. The etheric boundary line again.
Yes, because you will all eventually get this. There is a relationship between the inner plane and the outer plane, separated from one another by a boundary line energy moving at 186,172 miles per second, which everyone knows by now is
Light.
that which moves above it is a realm that is frictionless and where time and space, or time and distance, do not function the same way as we know it here in the physical realm. Things happen there before filtering down, and this is your soul here in that realm. It's comprised of all these different active urges in varying strengths and powers. Your body below on the physical plane is connected to that through this etheric boundary line. So things are moving up here in our subconscious mind, in our unconscious mind, before they filter down to the slow-moving physical substance. The inner plane interpenetrates the physical. It has a molding effect over the physical. This information is in Course 1 of the Brotherhood of Light lessons. And the outer plane, of course, it operates in a 4-dimensional realm. Or it operates in the 3rd-dimensional realm. And events, it's much denser. And it's in this realm where time holds great relativity to us, as does distance. Now, of course, when one starts observing psychic activity, We know that someone can foresee an event happening at a distance, or one can see an event happening in the past or happening in the future. A few weeks ago, as a group, we watched a film that was about a remote viewer that was used by intelligence agencies. And there was that wonderful sequence in the film about how where one remote viewer had to find a target. And he was describing this place, did a drawing of this place, and in the drawing included 2 giant water tanks, which he interpreted in his drawing as some type of water filtration unit. And when they were given a photograph of the place, everything was as he drew it, with the exception of these 2 water tanks. I think it was like a decade later, they were attending a conference in the town where this was, and there was a historic photo exhibit up. And in the historic photos was a picture of the same location, but when it had the water holding tanks on the property. So when one moves forwards or backwards psychically in a location, what you perceive is different than the time relationship that happens here in the physical plane. So, it is our thinking and feeling that attract events. That is how astrology works, lest you forget it. The soul is built of thought cells, what we might call psychoplasm, and from that 4-dimensional realm, these thought cells are impacting the events that happen to us that are of a very specific nature. When we can start measuring those thought cells, which is what we do with astrodynes, we then can start to recognize which of those trends of thinking is more likely to have a dominant effect in our life. So, a couple of quotes coming up in a row. Back to Zane. The actual events which thought cells can bring into the life depend upon 2 things. Look, punctuation. The psychokinetic power of the thought cells and the resistance offered by the physical environment to the kinds of events the thought cells try to bring to pass. I cannot overemphasize how important this is. We all live in different environments, and nowhere does it become more apparent to us than when one starts to travel. The opportunities that we have available to us in this country are far greater than in many other nations. And they are of different types. So it's also the same when you move geographically, not just by political boundaries, but when one moves in different ecological zones. There are different opportunities available to the organisms living in those zones. So when you try to do something, you always have to take the environment into account, because it either supports the type of activities that are seeking expression, or it suppresses them. One of the examples I always give is trying to grow orchids above the Arctic Circle. Not a great idea. The environment doesn't support that activity. And I don't know if any of you garden.
Just a little.
Yeah, one year I tried to put in my potatoes before the threat of frost had passed. I thought, oh yeah, they'll be in the ground. Well,
They stayed in the ground, didn't they?
entered the bush, yes. So that is environment also. And one has to think about that. There are different types of climates. There are physical climates, there are social climates, there are economic climates, there are political climates. These all become part of the ambiental influence. So, basically, our soul is built of thought cells. I like this quote. This is by Ken Stone, who wrote a book called Delineation with Astrodynes. There are 3 books available that talk about astrodynes, maybe 4 if you include stellar healing. Ken was an ace astrologer and a really good writer. The important thing that must be realized by the user of astrodynes, who would use them proficiently, is that astrodyne power is an indicator of the strength of the desires in the individual. If there is one thing that working with astrodynes should contribute to the consciousness of the astrologer, it is to show the patterns of energy working within the individual and the fact that each individual is a composite of various energy centers in a relative state of strength. So, hopefully I've beaten it in. Column 1. This is the relative state of strength that these desires are found in this particular chart. So that's what this particular column shows us, is from the most powerful to the least powerful, the corresponding planet. What is helpful when we interpret astrodynes is also being able to determine the percentage of that power, because it allows us to know sort of what piece of the whole is oftentimes running the individual. So the middle column gives us the percentage. And guess what, folks?
Always comes to 100.
It always adds up to 100. However, this does not. And there is a wide range of totals that I have seen in charts, the weakest being about 254.
Wow.
And I think the most powerful I've seen was somewhere 1,030 something astrodynes.
You remember who that was?
No.
God, that's really up there.
Yes.
I mean, everything's got to be aspecting and
And
angles.
closely
Right.
aspecting. And that, of course, means that there's a lot of oppositions, conjunctions, and squares happening in a chart like that. So, those are some of the extremes. We have to be careful when we try and compare these numbers, though, because it doesn't really work. I like to think of each chart as being a closed system. Energetically, it's a closed system. It's these numbers that are most important to me, because it's what percentage of that person's makeup is it. There are persons with weak charts. I think Doris did a book on the U.S. presidents and included their astrodynes. I'm not sure of the accuracy of it, because a few of the charts are rectified.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say unless there's a real record of one's birth when they're born. I don't trust rectified charts in any kind of research.
Are you?
How you doing?
Good.
Okay. Another quote. In terms of the native's capture, storage, and release of energy, the most prominent and heavily aspected planet is the planetary chart ruler. The things that it indicates powerfully influence the motivation and reactions of the native in an extremely wide scope. The planet with the most power maps the strongest motivating urge in the mental makeup of the native. Well, she's pretty much saying the same thing that Ken Stone did. The way I like to describe it is the dominant planet in the chart, somehow all of the other planets bow their urges towards that planet, so that it is almost always the dominant motivating theme. And when we start looking at sample charts, it'll become clear actually how it works. Now, we've thus far just talked about power. Now we're going to talk about conditioning. And we learned a lot about conditioning last week when we discussed the aspects. Though there are several factors that determine conditioning. One, when we talk about planets, the innate conditioning of that planet. Mars and Saturn,
Negative or disagreement.
negative or discordant. Venus and Jupiter,
Positive or neutral.
everything else, neutral. Essential dignities can add minute amounts of harmony or discord to a chart. And the essential dignities is the table we looked at either in the second or third class, which talks about home rule, exaltation, fall of the planets. Last week we discussed aspects, and aspects add both power but also conditioning energy. And much like the planets, with aspects we have harmonious, discordant, and neutral conditioning. Best way to figure it all out, use your Astrodynes. So, here we go. This is from Ken Stone. Power is the amount of desire energy which is pushing an individual to act. Harmony is the quality of the reaction to the actions shown by the power. What? Another quote? The more harmony a planet has, the more fortunate are the thoughts and behavior of the thought cells it maps. Influence, and the more fortunate are the events which the thought cells it maps use their psychokinetic power to bring into the life. And a couple more, and then we're done with the quotes. Talking about the best planet. When the native tunes in on things marked by the signature of the best planet, he or she unconsciously generates and experiences pleasant sensations. The native enhances his or her ability to attract a harmonious environment and more agreeable events, and steps up efficiency in the art of living and enjoying life. Now, doesn't that sound good?
I'm ready.
So, basically, the best planet in your chart is a talisman for you. It is your lucky charm, and it is the thing you really want to be consciously stimulating. Just one more quote on harmony. This comes from Albert Benjamin in the Astrodyne Manual. Actually, this is on discord. The more discord the planet has, the more unfortunate are the thoughts and behavior the thought cells it maps influence, and the more unfortunate are the events which the thought cells it maps use their psychokinetic power to bring into the life. So we're up to discord now. You're going to get the drift. Doan says, environmental associations which stimulate the native to feel discontented and to react negatively are signified by the worst planet. He could try to avoid these situations, but life must go on. And there are certain discords in it which none of us like. As the worst planet is more often than not the strongest planet, the native's life may be dominated by these energies. Any ideas why the worst planet can frequently be your dominant planet?
Because it makes a lot of aspects.
Yeah. The thing is, power comes from aspects. And, you know, just the way things worked out in this universe, that oppositions and squares pack a whole lot of power. And oftentimes, the corresponding thing, if you think about it, quite frequently, the things that are most important to you in life are things you struggle over. They seem to go hand in hand. There are the occasional individuals that have a dominant harmonious pattern, but we don't like them. So,
They're too happy-go-lucky.
yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
If you don't struggle, you're not going to enjoy the reward in the end.
I think that's true.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
That the effort, on one hand, effort brings about ability.
Right.
Not efforting doesn't bring any ability. So
Right.
when I look at a chart, as we talked about last week in terms of the stuff that makes us wriggle, that's where the really interesting story is in a chart. So when we're looking at harmony, it's basically shown in the chart here on the right. Now, if you have the Astrodyne or if you have the horoscope program, you're actually able to go in there and sort. And sometimes it's very interesting because here, I always like to sort by power because that's what I'm looking at first. I want to know what the dominant thought cells are. But it's fun sometimes to sort by harmony. Here, everything's out of order, but it gives you another perspective on a chart to see really how things are operating. Now, as you can guess, the larger the number, the greater the discord it has within the chart. This is the larger the number with a minus in front of it. In regards to harmony, the larger the number, which is not a negative number, integer, is the greatest harmony in the chart. And we want to identify what that is, because that, regardless, even if you have a really harmonious chart, you still want to find your dominant harmony and work with it. Just because of what we described earlier in our conversation before class started, how the painful trends of thinking most easily dominate. And this is because of a built-in biological need that we have.
So his greatest harmony was in being a revolutionary.
Mm-hmm. And he was quite successful at that. And it was in the 9th house of his chart, which is not only dealing with foreign nations, but foreign thoughts and philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
And what can be more revolutionary than to bring about a change of government nonviolently? Has that ever really been done? You know, when the United States got its independence from Great Britain, a whole lot of people died.
Well, Egypt was considered nonviolent.
And that came much later. This was 50 years ahead of that time, I believe. This happened in 1949. So that's, 52 years earlier. And I also feel we have yet to see whether the revolution, whether the social change in Egypt is nonviolent or not.
I don't think anything's happened.
A long way away.
You can't hear me? Okay. I did, is this a comment from,
No.
oh, okay.
No sound bars on that.
Oh, okay. I did ask one of our students this week if she could hear the conversations taking place in the classroom, and she said yes. So, because I was concerned about that. So, hopefully those of you who are out there watching, if you cannot hear the in-classroom discussion, do send a little note in the left-hand discussion column and let us know.
I learned last night there's 2 volumes, one on my computer and one on the silver light thing.
Oh, okay.
So I was frustrated, I was mad, I was having a hard time hearing it, and about after an hour I said, well, let me see that.
Oh,
Read that over, and
magic.
oh, I can hear now.
Well, hopefully all of you heard that. You can adjust the volume on your silver light.
Probably such an idiot.
It's a complicated world we live in.
Now you were actually a genius. You discovered something. Okay. Well, we've done planets. You get it? Power, harmony, discord. Now let's look at house power. The houses which show the greatest amount of power have the greatest energy in a chart. What I find is that the dominant houses in a chart show where our focus is. If you want to know where you spend your time, look at the most powerful houses in your chart, because that is where you spend your time. In this case, first house.
He was one of the most important things in his life.
And what was he spending his time on? Diet, exercise, meditation,
Controlling his thinking.
controlling his thinking, controlling his body, controlling his urges.
Yeah.
That's pretty focused. And when you look at people that we think of as leaving incredible legacies behind, I mean, both Burgoyne and Zane had dominant first houses as well.
Yeah, hugely.
Yeah. And, you know, it takes a slightly self-absorbed, obsessive person to do that sort of stuff. The rest of us would rather go merrily through life and let somebody else obsess on all of that. Okay. Already said that. So, last line here. These are the loci where our consciousness is continually directed. So, in his life, we can see one of the loci is the 10th house. Apart from person and personality, his attention was directed towards public, career, goals. And the 7th house, partnerships, companionships, and also the public. The best house, or the most harmonious house, is the one in which the harmony column has the largest positive number. I think you're all seeing a pattern here. This house represents the regions and environments through which the individual more readily attracts joy, pleasure, and ease.
He didn't necessarily attract it, trying to take care of himself.
No.
He hated it.
Yeah, that was, but again, that was his wriggle. That was the area where he developed his skill or ability because he was constantly, kneading that dough, so to speak. Getting the yeast active in it. However, the ninth house is where the joy would have come in. This could be travels to foreign countries. It could be engaging in religious rituals of some kind, and or engaging in study and things which contribute to the higher mind. All of that may have come very easily to him and would have been an area where he could sort of get laid back, rest on his laurels, or relax and have a good time.
Well, didn't he attract people, that whole community around him because of his philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of foreigners.
Right.
There were a lot of Indian nationals, but people were coming from all over the world to participate in this process.
Right.
Oh, the worst house. So you can imagine that's going to be the one in which the harmony column has the largest negative number. And we've pretty much discussed that. The things that he tried with his physical body included things such as fasting for weeks at a time, almost unto death. So that would look like a highly distorted first house. It was all done for a purpose, but nevertheless, this particular experience was no doubt hard on the body.
Right. And he chose to use his body to make that statement, which is kind of interesting.
It became, because of its importance, the most important, powerful tool he had. Especially in 1949, when all the riots broke out in India and Pakistan were dividing into a Hindu nation and an Islamic nation. And there were just incredible violences going on in communities. People bringing out millennium-old grievances with different members of their community. So, in a chart, this department represents environments and activities where the individual will most naturally attract frustrations, obstacles, and difficulties. Back to sign power. Basically, the process repeats itself. The signs listed at the top of the power and percentage columns express the greatest amount of energy. Right up here. Now, what happens when we're looking at signs, they color the planets that fall in them. Remember, these are the instruments on which the notes are being played. And I also like to look at, when we're doing delineation with a chart, is looking at signs as adjectives and adverbs, just as we use them to make our language more colorful and to give greater descriptions to things. The signs basically do the same. Most powerful sign indicates activities and interests to which we're most naturally attracted. They also indicate stronger temperamental traits. Let's do some delineation here. Dominant Scorpio, how does that color a temperament, a character?
Stubborn.
Stubborn, why?
Because it's fixed.
Very good.
Emotional,
Why?
because it's a water sign.
Excellent. Passionate.
Intent, yeah.
Passionate because it's the sign of sex.
Yeah.
This is water, fixed water. It goes through life with intense feelings about things. One could not describe, even though he was a Libra, one could probably not describe Gandhi as being lukewarm or milquetoast in any way.
Although he looked the part.
Right. All right, the same process. For the best sign, the best or most harmonious sign is the one in which the harmony column has the largest positive number.
Wow.
Is that possible? Or am I
298.
blind?
298.
Two?
Yes.
Yeah, that looks like it, Christopher.
There were a choice of two here.
Aquarius and Pisces. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Was there much harmony in this chart?
No.
Did the man get much rest?
No.
This is somebody who came, the man who fell to earth. This is somebody who came to earth to accomplish something. Now, however, it's important to know this. This sign represents environments and avenues of self-expression through which the individual experiences greater flow, aliveness, pleasure, and luck. So your dominant sign, much like your dominant planet, is used like a talisman. And it can actually be used as a talisman if you choose colors, stones, environmental factors that correspond with that sign. You can actually stack your deck by gravitating towards environmental factors. Remember back at the beginning of the class, we talked about the fact that environment determines a whole lot of what happens in this world. So if we gravitate towards the environments that show the least amount of resistance in our chart, things come to us with a greater amount of ease. What's the best quality of Pisces?
Intuitiveness.
And sympathy. So, I call it stimulating the pleasure center in the soul.
Oh, that's a good one.
We need to do this. Most of us, and I'm sure all of you will agree, that you don't need to stimulate your discord center in your soul. That merely the fact of living life is going to bring you plenty of opportunities of strife, friction, annoyance, aggravation, etc. But what we do have to do is consciously work at stimulating these pleasure centers. Same thing goes for the worst sign. The worst sign is the sign in which the column marked harmony has the largest negative number. This sign represents environments and temperamental traits where the individual will most naturally experience difficulties and frustrations. One should study the negative qualities of this sign and take every precaution to transform their expressions. Look at that. When I mentioned this in last week's class when we looked at Gandhi's chart, that he was fairly preoccupied with sex. And in Hindu religious traditions, much like Christian religious traditions, a preoccupation or an obsession on sex is oftentimes considered to be a great distraction to spirituality. So what he did is he spent a lot of his time concentrating on what would make him less sexually motivated. and then testing to see if he was or not.
It was the
A
test.
true
that got it.
Scorpio.
Yeah, that'll get you in trouble every time.
Let me see if that worked.
I guess it did. But that was a preoccupation. And again, reading, that's not necessarily the stuff that makes the news headlines.
I haven't heard that one.
No, but when you read an autobiography, this was something
He talked
this
about a
man
lot.
was really concerned about. It was a major preoccupation in his life. So when we go back and look at what Doan said earlier, when you're familiar with a native, you can actually see these things operating in their lives all the time. So what's interesting, when we use public figures, it's easy to draw assessments or judgments by not having complete pictures. And someone like this who was both a public figure, but who gave us the benefits of a written autobiography and an amazingly honest one called My Experiments with Truth. You can get the whole picture, and you can see exactly what was going on in the life. What were the dominant urges, and how were they expressing? And where were the frustrations, and where were the successes? All right. Besides studying the negative qualities and working to kind of, I call it the increasing grades of sandpaper, working on polishing oneself. But in this case, one tends to avoid the colors, the gems, and the environmental associations governed by the greatest discords in their chart. It's just not a recommendation.
Is diamonds discord to anybody?
Diamonds, yeah, they're ruled by Libra.
So,
And if Libra is discordant in your chart, as it is in mine, although strong, it's not considered a beneficial talisman. And certainly diamonds are discordant to much of the native population of Africa.
why is it?
Because they've been enslaved for mining them. Okay. Aspects. Compounds in consciousness. We talked about this last week, so this particular section of the class is a reiteration of that. We have 10 aspects. They represent how thought cells combine into compounds. And what's important in the process of chart delineation is also, much like with the planets, houses, and signs, I find looking at the aspects and really finding the power is very important, because these are key components of personality, and these are things that stand out, and your aspects become very dominant life things. There's power, harmony, discord. Now, when we're looking at aspects, we've basically divided the aspect graph in half. All of the aspects which fall in this half of the chart, which would be upper right hand, are longitudinal aspects. These are all measured by degrees of zodiacal longitude. In the lower left half, these are aspects which are measured by declination. They're called parallels. There's far fewer of those. When we're looking for astrodynes, the top number shows the power, And the lower line shows the conditioning energy. How much of that expresses with harmony or discord. And if I could see, I'll tell you what that is.
Christopher, Renee had the comment that maybe Gandhi should have boiled his milk. Have you ever heard that before?
Because of his discordant mood?
Well, I don't know, maybe she'll tell us.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, most Indians do cook their milk, either down into cheese, into paneer, it's cooked in chai, in hot spiced tea. I don't know that he had dysentery or digestive problems or anything from drinking raw milk, but I do think most Indians use a lot of milk because it is a form of protein, but he actually started removing that from his diet and eventually removed even pulses, even legumes from the diet, which is the primary source of protein, that and milk for most Indians. Huh. All right. It is not uncommon for the most powerful aspect to be a parallel. There is a reason for this. These aspects have a 1 degree orb of aspect. And the closer they are to perfect, the more powerful they are. So, dynamic area of consciousness. Go home and circle your most powerful aspect. It'll be quite revealing. Okay. The best aspect is the one with the largest positive number on the bottom line. No surprise that that's a trine. Not always. Because you can have trines that are in very wide orb, and you might have a sextile that's in a much closer orb and be more harmonious. So, we look for that. Now, when we're looking at the best aspect, what we want to do is once you identify that, start working that aspect. In this case, we can see it's a trine from the moon to Neptune. Somebody make up a sentence for me using the urges of the planets and the aspect.
He has luck with expressing the ideal in his domestic life.
Excellent sentence. So, it's basically you've got domestic urges and utopian urges in a luck compound. The moon is our feelings, our emotions, our sensitivities. Neptune is idealism, and it is our more noble spiritual impulses. It can make one highly intuitive, or it can expand consciousness. If we think of the moon as being our subliminal thinking, and Neptune being universal brotherhood, a moon-Neptune trine is the ability to expand one's consciousness out to where you feel connected to all of life. And that's one way that he worked with that. And, as you can guess, the worst aspect is the one with the largest negative lower number. That's, unsurprisingly, it's going to be a square or an opposition. This is the area of our consciousness where we have to express constant vigilance. This was part of our conversation before class started tonight, is how we have to always be vigilant with the negativity in our lives. This is an area of your life where you have to work at exercising greater degree of control, because it is something that's always going to be expressing itself, sort of with or without your participation. So, you want to become really aware of what it is, and then aim your life around grasping the wheel of that vehicle and to where you're driving it rather than having it drive you. In this case, we can see that the aspect is an opposition from Mars opposite Pluto. Oh my Lord. Aggressive urges in a separation compound with the universal welfare urges. Let's move to the negative traits, since this is a discordant aspect. What's the worst quality of Mars? Strife, harshness, accidents, injuries, anger. Pluto, the lower side of Pluto?
Coerciveness.
Coercion, manipulation. Pluto really wants conformity, and it brings it through groups. Where did this man have these experiences?
In large groups.
Yeah, in large groups. And he had it not only, if you think of it, as battling a colonial power, being part of what he did, but also in trying to unite a polyglot society. India is not a homogeneous society. There's probably 80 different languages that are spoken there. You know, a good half dozen different religions that are practiced. And so he also found trying to bring people together towards a cooperative purpose was really challenging, because within the groups themselves, there was constant infighting. And I would say probably the most painful thing that happened in his life was after independence, when India and Pakistan split into 3 separate nations. There was East Pakistan, West Pakistan. East Pakistan eventually became Bangladesh.
So it's part of India now again?
No, it's still a separate nation. Unless
I thought
this week.
the whole Pakistan bordered on India.
Well, in 1949, when the nation split up, it split into East Pakistan, West Pakistan, which is the Pakistan we know today. What used to be called East Pakistan, I think in the 1970s changed to Bangladesh, and then India. Question, comment?
You had a question from Paul Johnson. He says, why would one's worst sign be much worse than one's worst planet or house? I assume that the stress aspect to angles of the chart must be involved.
Is that a question about how does a sign become discordant?
Yeah, Paul, I'm not sure that I understand the question, whether this is based on actually looking at the information I've put up, whether the worst sign was more discordant than the worst planet. So I'm not sure of the actual question, but I would say one has to move forward with caution in all of those areas. One has to be really aware of their worst planet, of their worst sign. Primarily the worst planet represents urges that are constantly seeking expression. The worst sign shows environments that tend to bring in problems to the individual. The worst aspect actually shows the dynamic in consciousness, the way in which it is most habitually uniting in order to bring about the problems in one's life. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. So, now let's analyze charts. I've given you sample charts in your packets tonight. Those of you who are online, if you downloaded your handouts, you don't have to suffer through trying to read what's on the screen here. You can actually look at the chart And you will have to forgive me because the aspect graph, which I gave you in order to fit it on one sheet and reduce the use of paper, might require that you pull out a magnifying glass.
At least.
But I'll tell you what the aspects are.
I can't see.
Okay. Well,
Are you
read a
gonna
very
put them
dark
up here?
order, too. I might.
Oh, goody.
I just might do that. So I wanted to look at 3 charts tonight. We have a little less than an hour to actually put what we've learned about astrodynes into action. And what's really important for us to be learning in this class is how to delineate a chart. And there's little that I find brings in more direct, concise information than the astrodynes. If you only had 20 minutes with someone to discuss their chart, rather than going through and doing the sun, moon, ascendant, this, that, and the other thing, I would say if you have the astrodynes at your fingertips, you could read those and you will give the individual really clear, concise, powerful information about themselves that they can leave with and use. It allows us to fast forward in our delineations. I mean, a true delineation of a chart, if you were going to sit there with someone and go through each and every aspect in their chart, would probably take 3 hours. They would have been asleep at 46 minutes into the session.
I didn't understand any of it.
Right. Yeah, because you're speaking in astrological jargon. So, fast track by using the astrodynes, because people, especially nowadays, people want information and they want it fast. So here's a chart of somebody who has a dominant Mercury. This is a female.
Were they a writer, an author?
Mm-hmm. And more.
That would make sense.
And they, and they suffered from groups.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Right.
Even if you have a harmonious Pluto.
What did you say, Vicki?
Well, group, a certain amount of suffering was groups, coercive elements associated with the 10th house.
Let's do some delineation here, which Vicky's doing very well. Dominant Mercury, 14.1% of the power. Let's look at some things about this. What might contribute to Mercury's dominance in the chart?
The fact that it's conjunct
In an angle.
Mars.
In an angular house. Powerful house. We can already see, they just pointed out, there's a powerful conjunction here, less than 1 degree apart from a conjunction with Mars in an angular house. So that packs a wallop.
Close trine.
Would you want to be interviewed by this person?
No.
Why not?
I don't think I want to be in the same room.
I mean,
A little bite to their communication.
right, but this, I would call this the iron fist and the velvet glove.
Where's
Because-
the velvet glove?
Libra.
Oh, in Libra, duh.
Libra sun, Libra ascendant,
Right.
Mars in Libra,
Right.
Mercury in Libra.
Okay.
So if this person, if you were sitting in a room and this person was asking you questions, how would it go?
Oh, they'd be in charge, that's for sure.
They would, but it would probably be soft and pleasant
Social.
and sociable, and they would win your confidence until when?
Say
Yeah.
It's
something.
like patting a cat and then suddenly it turns around and
Right.
bites you or smacks you.
Right.
That's how that would work. Oh, what happened?
No.
Let's look at aspects.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, your aspects look good up there.
Do they? All right, then look up there. And let us identify the aspects to Mercury. Mercury forms no aspect to the Sun, but it's in mutual reception to the Sun. I would need a table of essential dignities to tell you exactly why. I know that the Sun is at its fall
In Libra.
in Libra.
Christopher, it's not in mutual reception with Mercury.
Oh, I'm sorry,
That's
that's
Venus.
Venus. Obviously, I can't see what I'm looking at.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, the Sun is at its fall, Venus is at her home.
Right.
So, all right, on to Mercury. No aspect to the Sun. The first aspect formed is a trine to the Moon. Look at both the power and the harmony here. This trine is 11.84 astrodynes, it's 11.84 harmodynes. So, where is that?
On the 9th.
Jupiter, 16 Libra 14.
It's Mercury.
It's Mercury Moon.
Oh, thank you.
20
23, I was thinking that's a wide orb. I'm obviously really tired. 23 Gemini 31 to 23 Libra 21, 10 minutes apart. That's a really powerful aspect.
So it must be a 12-degree orb.
Right, Mercury gets, once it's an aspect in orb, then it gets the power of the luminary.
Ah.
So that's why it gets almost 12 astrodynes of power, even though normally it'd be a 10.
So, let's make up some words here. We've got the intellectual urges in a luck compound with the domestic urges. Anyone want to hazard a delineation?
Well, the domestic urges are expressing through an intellectual sign. So being domestic is not an easy thing for this person in the sense that we think of domesticity. This is a person who seeks to be in the public, expressing opinion and
Like a Martha Stewart.
on a daily basis, they want to broadcast their perspective on things or whatever.
And sometimes we have to move away from the urges and look at other facets. The Moon and Mercury both rule mentality in a chart. Mercury being what we know as rational thinking, logical thinking, cerebral thinking, but the Moon is all that other stuff, where we move from instinct, impression, intuition, and subconscious urges. Being together in a trine actually makes for a very powerful mind, because she's able to integrate those two. Basically, it's integrating right and left brain is what happens with the Mercury-Moon trine. So this is somebody who's able to read all of the subtle clues, but also gain all of the language clues that are going on in any situation. And it's involving first house, self. Ninth house, as Vicki pointed out, public expression. Let's get these ideas out and before the audience.
Who is this?
We'll tell you. Let's look at a few more aspects. Well, I've got you in class. All right, so Mercury forms a sextile to Venus. The intellectual urges are in an opportunity compound with the social urges. And location, first house to the 11th house. How's that going to impact her?
She has a lot of friends.
A lot of friends. Do they like her? More than likely.
Yeah.
Does she like them? More than likely. She might even choose people socially that provoke something intellectually, where there's something positive that comes through those interactions. So the ability to move in groups or in social circles. If we move to the next aspect that Mercury forms, it's one that Vega pointed out. Look at the power on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to hazard a guess that that's the most powerful aspect in this chart. And indeed it is. There's nothing more powerful than that. So we need to really focus in on this aspect in order to know this woman. And I sort of described it earlier, the iron fist in the velvet glove. This is somebody whose aggressive urges and intellectual urges are in a prominent compound to where they cannot be separated. It's all in Libra, though, which makes everything kind of, you know, fluffy and feminine. So it's not quite a pit bull.
But there are elements of the pit bull in there.
Yeah, I think it's a hybrid.
There are definitely.
Yeah, it could be like a Pekingese pit bull hybrid. Or a Pomeranian pit bull. You know, you want to tie little pink bows in it, but
Well,
once
bite you while
its
you're
jaw
doing it.
closes on you. That might be somebody who really efforted in order to express herself.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the strife.
Mars always brings strife. It might be in the form of a, what, speech impediment?
Well, something about their physical body.
Or their physical appearance or body might attract attention to them, might make them self-conscious or conspicuous in some ways. Because wherever Mars falls, we have strife.
Right. But it's not overwhelming. I mean, it's only almost 4 discordines.
Right. It's not overwhelming. But it is overwhelmingly powerful.
Yeah.
So, because this rules the chart, how might this describe a person if you were in a room with her? She might come across as being a little fidgety or agitated or constantly scanning the room or constantly perceiving, taking in information.
Nervous.
Yeah, the Mercury being the nervous system, it's being agitated by Mars when
And
they're in a
heated
conjunction.
up.
It's
Yeah.
being heated up.
Eat it up.
So this, like, would she be slow in responding or would she have quick quips?
I'd say quick.
I
Quick?
would say quick, very fast. Because as you pointed out, the moon is also in an air sign.
Right, if she doesn't logically know the answer, she will intuit the answer
Intuitive.
or intuit the question.
Now, can I ask a question?
Of course.
With Venus and Neptune, they are conjunct also, even though they're in 2 different signs, are they not?
They are. Let's look at the power of that aspect since we're doing astrodynes. Compared to the Mercury-Mars aspect of 2 planets less than a degree apart in an angular house, the power here is 7.48 astrodynes. So it's, you know, it's actually a little more than half the power of the other conjunction. Nevertheless, wherever we have conjunctions in our chart, we have what? Prominence. These are things that stand out. What else might be outstanding about her?
She has glamorous friends.
I would agree.
Possibly in.
The Venus is in Leo. Do they always know how to dress?
Well,
Venus is at
Could
her.
be kind of gaudy.
little drama queen.
Yeah. Friends might be.
The baubles may be a little too big.
Weren't hoops in last decade? But Neptune's there too. There could possibly be charitable causes or other idealistic or utopian associations that are tied in with group work and friendships. Now, conjunctions we've talked about, they're always kind of different when the planets aren't in the same sign, when they're in adjoining signs. So you've got Venus in Leo and Neptune in Virgo. hypochondriacal friends?
Well, Virgo's not real easy for Neptune to express.
No.
No, because to me, Virgo's always the princess and the pea. And when Neptune's in there, and they're telling the story, it's like a fish story. The pea just
Gets
keeps
bigger.
getting bigger. It wasn't a pea, it was a bowling ball at the bottom of those mattresses. Okay. Oh, let's pick another aspect.
Oh, you
Moving
got-
with Mercury.
Okay.
Mercury forms a trine to Jupiter. Religious urges in a luck compound with the intellectual urges. Could have a sense of optimism, an abiding sense of faith. This is reiterated in more than one place here because the moon and Jupiter are conjunct in this chart. So that creates an abiding sense of well-being. Mercury trines Jupiter, so the mind can easily train itself to think more expansively, or to think more philosophically, or to think more benevolently.
But it's in its, would it be its detriment? All right, what, the sign of its opposition?
Yeah, it's in
Is
its
that, I don't know,
fall.
it's fall.
Wait,
So it's
no,
not
no.
as easy for Jupiter to
It's in its
express
detriment, you're right.
through Gemini. I mean,
Are we talking Jupiter here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
Jupiter's
talking
in
about
its
Jupiter, the
detriment.
religious urges expressing through the intellectual urges. So
Right.
the two are, you know,
I
they
think,
counteract
I
one
believe,
another,
I think
or balance one another. So maybe she's more balanced.
that, or maybe she has issues of faith. Well, Jupiter's with the moon in the house of faith of the higher mind.
Mm-hmm.
There
So
could
it
be some
fluctuates
religion.
a bit?
Yeah, it could. It could be fine until she starts to think about it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you know, she might become more nihilistic. Pick another aspect. Oh, the next one is a sextile from Mercury to Saturn. We can see here that Mercury forms a trine, a sextile, a conjunction, a trine, a sextile, and one square. Basically, Mercury's harmonious, and if we look at the Astrodynes, we can see it's her second most harmonious planet. So you're very lucky when your dominant planet's also harmonious, because not only is it a great asset or skill that you have, but it has the opportunity to express itself with ease in the world. All right.
So she's got that Mercury. What was it? Lord didn't like it when I used the word drains. Yeah. What?
Conciliatory
You can,
aspect?
some-
Conciliatory
well,
factor?
I'll just say my language. It drains the opposition between Saturn and Jupiter and the moon.
Okay.
Opposition from Saturn to the moon?
Saturn forms a square to the sun in opposition to the moon,
Yeah.
So there's
and opposition to the
Mercury-
midheaven and a square to the ascendant. So Mercury comes along and it sextiles Saturn and it forms a trine to the moon. So it also, this is somebody who can use her conscious thoughts to bring in balance, harmony, equilibrium, a pleasant outlook, a pleasant approach to something that's very dynamically tense in the chart, which is this T-square. Okay, we've talked about those aspects.
So who is this?
Barbara Walters.
That's what I've been thinking all the time. I was going to write it down just so I could prove it. But then when you said, you know, the one thing that I wasn't sure about was, let's see if I can remember.
Is that Pluto in the 10th? When she kind of, in a way, she's kind of a power broker.
Mm-hmm. She is a power broker. And I always look at Pluto in the 10th as being somebody whose work may ultimately have an impact on mass destiny,
Oh, yeah.
which she has worked for some of the largest news networks. She has interviewed everyone who is anyone.
Yes, she has.
So, American broadcast journalist and author. Hosted Today, The View, 2020, ABC Evening News, and World News. Her book was Houses for a Dominant, Harmonious Mercury. How to Talk to Anyone About Practically Anything.
I should read that.
And isn't the ninth house, I mean, Gemini likes to talk, and is it
Right.
publishing up there as well?
Mhm. It is, and broadcast journalism is the ninth house. It's the media.
Media, right.
So, and if we look at the Astrodynes, the ninth house is her most harmonious house. So,
It's a good place for her to be.
right, what has she done? She has taken her dominant urge, Mercury, which is intellect, both perception and expression, questioning and answering, and expressed it through an area that has to do with publishing, broadcast journalism, news, etc. And has she been successful?
Yeah, very
Certainly, when you look at the resume, I'm sure the bank account might be indicative of that as well.
You know what? And that Saturn in her third house, doesn't she have a sister that is disabled or
Yeah,
something that was a
very.
real,
Yes.
has been a real source of
Yes.
secret sorrow to her or
Well,
something?
yeah, 'cause
Which would
growing,
be that T-square to that sun up there in the,
yeah, growing up, she always had to make that disabled sister look good. That, the mother kind of put that burden on her.
Yeah, and Uranus opposing the ascendant and opposing the sun.
well,
I think she's had
she was a
3 marriages.
groundbreaker. Well, she was also a pioneer in her
Plural
profession.
marriage, or?
Well, no, in her profession. Wasn't
Okay.
she the first woman?
She was
She
the first
was the
woman
first
actor.
in a lot of
Yeah.
things that she did.
Didn't she also Miss America?
That I don't know. She'd probably interview many though.
I'm positive she was.
Okay.
Way back.
Yeah, you all may actually know more about her than I do. So, want to do another chart?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
She has a peculiar speech.
Yeah.
Yes, she
almost a
does.
speech impediment. It's kind of interesting, and I've never done a study of it, but people with prominent Mercuries sometimes do have.
Right, and her most powerful aspect was Mars conjunct Mercury, so she was ribbed for that a lot. The biggest ribbing came from Gilda Radner back in the 70s.
Yeah.
On Saturday Night Live when she did Baba Wawa.
Love that.
And, you know, it flipped her out until her daughter told her to get over it. And then she was able to accept it as, you know, hey,
I'm Baba Wawa.
yeah, what do they say? Imitation is the best
Compliment.
compliment, yeah. So,
Did she do The View? Did she start?
yeah, she did start the View.
Started The View. That was a big deal.
Yeah, all of those women getting together and arguing with one another
Oh.
in the middle of the day.
Very, very
Right,
hard
and
to
having
watch.
important guests
Exactly.
and going after them sometimes too.
So I think what was bigger was when she first broke into the industry and she was across from a male anchor who just loathed the fact that a woman
Oh, yeah.
would possibly.
That's that sun opposition Uranus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a trailblazer.
Who was the male?
I can't remember. My memory these days is faulty. But 3 months ago, I could have told you.
Question. Renee says, it's a blessing if your harmony has power. Is there such a thing as a harmonious and powerful Saturn?
Some people have it.
Yes, I'm not sure if powerful and harmonious, but I have seen harmonious Saturns. All right, here we go.
Oh, we can see this person's name.
You can?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
okay.
I'm pretty sure I know who this is.
Can any of you read that?
Yeah.
Oh, Vicki, you be quiet then.
She can read it.
But you can ask very prompting questions that will lead the class on.
Okay.
The reason I usually like to do this without saying who it is because it's very easy to want to make the chart fit what we know about the person. But what's great in these classes is when the students are able to discover things from the chart, that once we reveal who the personality is, the light bulbs go on in terms of how this actually works. So, this is a male, and it is a dominant Mercury individual.
Uranus.
Excuse me. Thank you. I am really tired. This is a dominant Uranus individual, and let's look at where that falls in this chart. Describe Uranus to me, someone, because that's going to describe this man.
Brilliant, inventive,
Innovator.
innovator.
Okay, unique, brilliant, innovator. And what were you saying, Michelle?
Individualistic.
Individualistic, a trailblazer, a genius in some ways. Eccentric, independent spirit. Now, talk to me about the 4th house.
How's the home? Father?
Domestic areas.
Has unusual homes.
Land, property, real estate, the environment are all ruled by the 4th house. And it's in the sign of Capricorn, which tends to be more business. It tends to be the ruling political party, the established order of things, the status quo, and the word status alone.
Yeah.
So this might be somebody who wants to shake up the status of the environment, or of the home, or of architecture, which is all 4th house activities.
Sounds like well,
No.
Or in this city, Bart Prince. But
I'm trying to think of his name.
it'll pop up. Okay, I want to talk some more about this.
He might run for president.
Okay,
Go on, I'm thinking.
then we'll see his name plastered everywhere.
I don't know what's his name. He runs that TV show.
Well, you know what though? This person is pretty old. With Neptune in Cancer, right?
Very good.
Older than we are.
The more you do astrology, one of the first things you do when you have an unmarked chart is you go and look for the positions of Pluto and Neptune, because that immediately puts the generation. If you look for Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, you'll know the time period in which someone was born. This is prior to World War I, so he would be this year 101 years old.
So not him.
Yeah. So that's one way of eliminating things. So let's look at what makes Uranus powerful in this chart. We can see here it has 63.69 astrodynes, 12.4% of the power, and a minus 18.15 Harmonize. So this is a dominant discordant Uranus. As we discussed earlier, it is not unusual for one's dominant planet to be discordant because part of the way in which it gets its energy.
We don't have this chart, right?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's the.
Look for a Libra rising
It's on
with
page
Jupiter
9.
in the first house.
Page 9.
Oh, there. Sorry. You know what it is, this thing is different, that's why I didn't, I was looking at
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. I tried to sort it
That's
by.
okay. I just didn't, that's what I was looking at. I was
Did it come
looking
out neutral? Is it Sun, Moon, Mercury? In that
at Sun,
order?
Moon, Mercury, yeah.
Okay, I always try to sort it by power, but in this case, it may have sorted itself by neutral, and I
Mhm.
didn't get through my editing process. So, this is a good training ground for you, though, to be able to look at the Astrodyne report in a different pattern. In this case, just in the natural order of the planet signs and houses, to where you really have to pay attention to the percentage column and the harmony discord column. Now, if we were to look at the aspects formed to Uranus, it forms no aspect to the Sun and Moon. The first aspect which is formed is a trine to Mercury. 24 Capricorn to 29 Taurus. Fourth house, home, family, father, real estate, property, the environment. And the eighth house, other people's money, death, taxes, resources.
Did he inherit some money?
Perhaps, or one might think this is somebody who could get money through gifts, grants,
Business
subsidies, financial backers, guardian angels.
Well, since it's the Earth sign, you'd think it would be more business related.
Right, might even be able to buy up blocks of property using other people's money. But let's also look at this in terms of being the intellectual urges and the individualistic urges tied together in a love compound. Would this man be inventive?
Yeah, very creative.
He would be dreaming up stuff none of us could think of.
Right.
Because keep in mind, Uranus is the upper octave of Mercury. Mercury's cerebral thinking, but Uranus is what happens next. And when you start studying the process of creativity and persons in the sciences and arts that have come up with new ways of doing things, sometimes it comes through dreams, sometimes it comes through these sudden flashes of inspiration, situations where they've spent a lot of time really mulling over problems in their domain area, and they go away from that and walk by the woods and the pond, and then suddenly what comes flooding into consciousness is the ideas of what is the solution to this thing that has been perplexing them. So it's definitely an aspect for genius. Comment or question?
Your long distance audience
He says, don't read it out.
is guessing.
Oh, they're guessing who
They're
it is.
guessing.
Okay, when we get to the name, you can tell me if they guessed correctly or not.
Okay.
So let's look at another aspect. That one's pretty amazing. There is a opposition from Uranus to Mars.
A very close one.
Look at that. 24 Capricorn, 32 minutes. 25 Cancer, 16 minutes. That is one powerful, intense opposition. My goodness, is that the most powerful aspect here?
You've got,
Yeah.
yeah, we can't see the Astrodynes.
Okay.
I mean, the grid.
Right.
Can
It's
you pull
not.
it up? Okay.
It's not, okay.
Yes, I will. I guess pushing the laser button doesn't forward the screen.
I was looking at it.
Have I blinded anyone yet?
I thought that'd be interesting on the camera.
Okay. There's the aspect grid.
Yeah.
Sorry I didn't bring that up sooner.
Well, it's still pretty powerful, gosh, 1127.
Right, it's the second most powerful aspect. The only thing that's more powerful is the conjunction of Jupiter to the ascendant.
Yeah, that's sitting right on top.
Right, that is separated by less than half a degree. It looks like 34 minutes apart. So that's really powerful. But let's talk about this other one. What does Mars-Uranus bring? Discord, accidents, disasters,
Yes.
warfare,
Yeah.
combat.
General.
You know, when I look at this, although I don't know this was in Da Vinci's chart, but I think oftentimes of how throughout history, quite often it's during periods of warfare that the greatest inventions are made.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have patrons for your genius for such activities. And I mean, Da Vinci, who was an incredible artist, also was an architect. He designed fortifications, he designed machines of his day to, you know, lob giant rocks and projectiles into other people's castles and
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. He got paid a lot for
Warfare.
yeah. So, to some degree, genius could come out of combat here in all of this. It could be motivated by that. And or, what about Mars in the 10th house? Might one take on a military career?
Very much
It's
so.
certainly possible.
That's certainly in the realm of possibility that that could happen.
But Mars and Neptune, holy cow.
Yeah, that's
We talked a lot about Neptune on Sunday. Dreams, fantasies, illusions, and the sea.
Admiral?
So I will give you, this man did work, I think, in minesweeping
Oh, really?
in the Second World War.
It's a dangerous occupation.
You know, by sea or by land.
Jesus.
All right. More Uranus aspects. There's a square from Uranus to Saturn. Well, 24 Capricorn to 2. That's a wide square. That's 6, 7, 8 degrees apart. So we can see the power of that square is 1.75 astrodynes. Not really powerful, but what happens when you have Saturn squaring Uranus? How does that work when you try to bring new ideas to a conservative public?
Well, can it bring order out of chaos?
Oh, I like that.
A little?
Order out of chaos. Or chaos out of order.
Or does this person have difficulty with bringing order to his creativity, or is it more?
I don't know. I actually, when I look back on what he accomplished in his life, this is somebody who did more than most, and we'll talk about that. What I think is very interesting here, just kind of sliding away from Uranus, the other Uranus aspects are the opposition to Neptune, inconjunct to Pluto, and a trine to the ascendant. But when I look at ninth house, that last chart we looked at had a prominent ninth house
Mm-hmm.
with Gemini there
Right.
and the Libra rising. This wasn't
Oh,
planned
that's
this way.
interesting. Yeah.
But she was quite a good public figure and a good journalist,
Mm-hmm.
being able to bring things to educate the public. So this, I would say, when I look at this chart, I see this as a man who's an educator with the sun and wanting to have an impact on the masses. To win a wide, Pluto is a wide audience over to a particular philosophy or point of view. And
Well, and he's perceived as an authority.
Oh, wow. The Sea of Golden Valley. Jacques Cousteau.
yeah. So, 1910 to 1997, French naval officer.
Oh, wow.
Mars-Neptune conjunction in the 10th house of career.
I said admiral, that wasn't.
Not too far. Ecologist, explorer, scientist, innovator, photographer, researcher, co-developed the aqualung.
Yeah. That was
I mean, to think of how could man breathe underwater, that takes some, not just imagination, but what I think is most important about Cousteau is he not only pioneered marine conservation, but he was really at the vanguard of the whole movement of ecology. How one system impacts another, and that irresponsibility in one area has an impact on all other areas.
Yeah.
And that's where his real innovation was. He was at the foreground of an entire movement.
Does Mercury trine Jupiter?
I believe it does. And that was the first aspect we discussed.
Right. Well, I hadn't noticed the houses.
Or no, we discussed the Uranus trine.
So he was probably really good at getting grants to fund his.
Yeah.
He
His
had
work.
Jupiter on
Yeah.
the ascendant. He was a very jovial guy. He had a marvelous laugh and,
He was.
oh yeah.
Well, that's very interesting.
One more chart, and then you can go home. We've got to do this one. What else do I have to say? Okay. Right, use television. That was also.
That's a Pluto thing
Yeah,
too.
I mean, he was teaching us science every week when I was a child.
Well, in that commercial where they talk about, we didn't care about whaling until we saw a whale. I mean, he really brought the whole ocean to us.
He did. That's the guy I was trying to think of earlier. I was on the wrong year.
Who was that, the guy you were trying to think of?
Donald Trump.
Donald
We were
Trump.
talking about the
Oh,
real
okay.
estate and
Yeah,
stuff.
well, here you have it.
Paul Johnson, that was his guess, which was a very good guess.
Yeah, very
Because of the Uranus in the 4th house of Cousteau, if you ignored the age thing, and which was, and here we're doing the Donald.
Now we're doing the Donald. Yeah.
Well.
All right, now you know who it is. We can conform the chart to fit the personality. Could you imagine Donald Trump having a dominant sun? Is there any signs of
With
surprise?
Mars and Leo in the first house, certainly has kind of an irritating, stressful
Presence.
personality.
Yeah, the first house is your stage presence. So,
But he does it with drama and flair.
let's talk about it. Look at the sun. It's not in an angular house. And look how different it is in power from the moon. The sun is 15.3 astrodynes. The moon is 15 astrodynes. So here's a good example of a chart where you have two urges that are in equal strength, that are vying for the personality. My guess is we generally see this personality, which is the sun. We may not really have a clue the profound affection he may have for his children. Does he have kids?
Yeah, he has kids, and they, from what I've read, they are very fond of their father.
There's the sun that's following in his footsteps, right? And
Yeah, I imagine it's a mutual admiration society.
Well, but
It's
they
got-
oppose one another. Moon in the fifth is in opposition to the sun.
Yeah.
Maybe they
it
just don't
is.
like his friends.
Or it's, you know.
They
where
like
does he-
him, but not
where
his
does he spend
friends.
his time? In the sun activities or his moon in the fifth activities? You can't do them both. That's his problem, right?
Yeah, it's a seesaw. When you have an opposition, you have a seesaw. When one side's down, the other's up. When that side goes down, the other's up. And it creates one of those life things where you're constantly running over to this end and then back to the other end. Which am I
Except
going to
that
do?
he's got another conciliator, or, you know, that Mars and his ascendant drain that opposition.
That's
So as
us.
long as his personality is buoyant
Or
and
his vitality,
Or his
his
vitality,
physical
then he can
stamina is such. He
pull
can
it
run
down.
to Atlantic City
and the kids can
and the kids can come along and,
Right. do his deal.
yeah.
Right, and his Leo personality, he probably likes children anyway.
So, yeah, Donald Trump, dominant sun. Now, if we look at this, of course, the sun opposes the moon, and they're kind of dead on here, 20 to 22. What's more powerful than the opposition is the sun forms a parallel and opposition to the moon in this chart. So we have the separation complex that has, the volume has been amplified by the intensity complex, the parallel aspect. There's probably been issues between children and friends, or lovers and friends. Either friends not liking lovers, or lovers not liking friends. I think he's been very successful in short-term marriages.
It's short-term marriage. That's one way to look at it, Christopher.
So,
Has,
That's funny.
has he been married more than twice? I think he's,
I think he's been, yeah, I think so.
I think so. I think at least 3 times, but I must say I'm not the expert on Donald Trump. I think I've seen him twice on television, and certainly have
I
heard
know
his
of
name
two.
since the 80s in magazine articles. But no, I think it's a fascinating person because of the power urges. And then I think a couple of years ago, it may still be on, there's a television show where he's like the boss and he goes through.
Fires people.
Fires
Yeah.
people.
gosh, yes.
Well, I think he still has a show.
Okay,
They changed the format a little.
They brought his son in.
Is that what?
yeah, obviously
His son is running.
I have failed to watch it, but I
I've
think
never seen it, but a lot of people
I
have.
imagine a lot of people have. He has a dominant sun followed by a dominant moon. Dominant sun is somebody who wants power. Dominant moon is somebody who becomes a household name.
But he's also kind of invented too, with that Uranus conjunct the sun thing.
I think he's invented himself several
Times
times over.
That's a good way of
I
putting
think
it.
only the hair has remained the same.
Well, look, the Uranus is exactly sextile, his ascendant, so,
Excellent.
yeah.
I'll bet he has remarkable friends. Not only people who are powerful, but he probably knows geniuses and
Intellectual.
wants friends that he can learn from. And that may be part of the criteria in his choosing friends. Could be tied in either to status or their ability to generate new thought in him. One could suspect that there are secret sorrows tied in with affectional matters. Venus in the 12th house can create anything from clandestine affairs to unrequited love and or to disappointments in love. Conjunct Saturn sometimes brings in You know, what was that film that came out with Glenn Close and,
Oh, Dangerous Liaison.
yeah, no, not Dangerous Liaisons.
Oh,
Yeah.
But that sounds good too.
I think he said one time that he picks his
The one with
wives to
Glenn
be
Close?
his greatest adversaries, or, you know, or he builds them up so that
And
they
Michael
can become
Douglas.
their,
Yeah,
Was the stalking film.
yeah.
yeah, I've never seen it, but I
Oh, okay.
certainly know about it.
Yeah. What was that film called? Does anyone remember? Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. It was. Dang, I hate getting old. It was pretty creepy. It was an affair gone bad.
I think, are you talking about what was the girl, the lady's name?
Glenn
Close,
Close.
close. Can't think of
One,
the name
God, I
of
think I
it.
know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
I just can't remember the title.
Oh, well.
That's all. I can see the credits rolling. Like,
But she kind of went crazy,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, literally crazy.
Yeah, right, really.
That was an awesome show.
So, we're nearing the final moment of this show.
So that Neptune in the second, does he have money and oil?
Well, somebody ring him up and find out.
Money and oil.
Well, he's definitely got money and he's probably invested it into oil's a wise choice, gold's a wise choice, at least it was.
It's in Libra,
Yeah, okay,
so
that's
it's
it.
probably
His money
more in
comes from nowhere, out of nowhere.
contracts of some sort. Intellectual
That
instruments.
or art.
Art.
He may actually have an art collection that none of us know about.
He has gone bankrupt.
Yeah. He went bust real big, didn't he?
Yeah.
Famously, he went bust.
But when you learn, when you know how to create, it's just a matter of going out and creating.
Christopher?
Because you have all the
Fatal
contacts and
Yeah.
resources.
Who said that?
Peg.
She said what?
Thank you, Peg. Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction.
That's it, Fatal
That
Attraction.
became a buzzword after the film. Or,
So did Cindy.
okay. Thank you. I'm glad we have some older members with memories intact out there. All right, I'm not going to go through the homework because pretty much I've written it down in your notes for tonight, but I'd actually like you to do it for yourself, not for me. Sitting down and going through and writing down your most powerful planets and all of these details. Your most harmonious planet, the amount of harmony, your most discordant planet, amount of discord. Basically describe how that has functioned in your life. This can become one of the most insightful personal journaling processes you do, and will give you layers and layers of insight with your chart. Go through, do the signs,